everyone, my name is Fiona Cool and I would like to welcome you to this Cross River Partnership workshop for the International Car Free Day London Summit. Today we will be talking about zero emission logistics, in particular last mile deliveries, cycle freight and fleet electrification. As part of the workshop, we will be joined by a number of speakers from Cross River Partnership: Susanna Wilkes, CRP's Director, myself Fiona Cool, Anusha Rajamani, Ross Phillips and Laura Jacklin. I'd also like to thank Joshua West, our Communications Manager at CRP, for helping with the technological aspect of putting this digital workshop together. In terms of the workshop agenda, as you can see, we will briefly introduce Cross River Partnership before moving on to the main focus of this workshop, where we will discuss the need for low emission freight and some of the strategies that businesses can implement. So without further ado, it gives me great pleasure to pass over to Susanna Wilkes, the Director of Cross River Partnership, to provide a brief overview of everything CRP.
Brilliant. Thanks very much indeed, Fiona. Thank you very much for joining us, everyone, to learn about transitioning to zero emission logistics. As many of you know, Cross River Partnership was formed 26 years ago to build the Millennium Bridge across the River Thames. By now, we're actively helping with delivering London's future together with all sorts of government, business and community partners. CRP is delivering a wide range of projects. One of these, Healthy Streets Every Day, is working across 17 boroughs to increase all of London's streets and their users' contributions towards cleaning up our air. You'll hear more about that later. Another, the Electric Vehicle Fleet-Centred Local Energy System, or EFVs, is creating efficiencies in the use of smart charging to power the clean delivery vans used across London by UPS. Clean Air Villages is supporting businesses, hospitals and communities to keep London's air clean as COVID restrictions are lifted. CRP's vision is to empower people to deliver innovative projects that support places to survive and thrive. And we've been supporting the transition to zero emission logistics for more than a decade now. This started with a transnational research project where CRP learnt lessons alongside other continental cities. The project was called Electric Vehicles in Urban Europe and identified the roles that all of the tools and levers shown on your screens need to play. CRP has also delivered projects on freight electric vehicles, zero emission last mile logistics, tailored and innovative solutions for freight, or freight tails. The first area-based freight and delivery servicing action plan that CRP co-produced with the West End Partnership back in 2018 is now being revisited with a view to shaping the West End of London to be ready for a new, different and cleaner future post-COVID. Here to tell us more about low emission freight, it gives me great pleasure to hand you back to my colleague Fiona Cool, CRP Project Manager. Thank you, Fiona.
Brilliant, thank you, Susanna. So now that you've had a good overview of what we do here at CRP, I'm going to be doing a brief introduction as to why we should be considering low emission freight. Air quality is the largest environmental health risk in the UK. Two pollutants in London are attributed as the main source of poor air quality: particulate matter and nitrogen dioxide. In fact, King's College estimated that in 2010 in London alone, there was the equivalent of 5,900 deaths due to long-term exposure to nitrogen dioxide and 3,500 deaths due to exposure to PM 2.5. Additionally, as you can see from the statistics on screen, air pollution has huge impacts on the physical and potentially mental health of the population, and often disproportionately impacts the more vulnerable members of society, particularly the elderly, children, and pregnant women. There have also been multiple early studies and more recently a peer-reviewed study in the Netherlands that have shown a possible connection between higher exposure to pollutants such as nitrogen dioxide and particulate matter and the impacts of coronavirus. So where do these emissions come from? Well, road transport is responsible for a large percentage of these emissions, with approximately 50% of all nitrogen dioxide emissions in London coming from road transport. Diesel vehicles in particular are the highest contributor to nitrogen dioxide and particulate matter emissions. Despite this, almost all of London's freight is carried by road using diesel vehicles. In fact, this actively accounts for over 10% of PM2.5 emissions and for approximately a fifth of traffic in the capital. So not only is this bad for air quality, but it's also extremely inefficient. TfL calculates that the total cost of congestion to London's economy is approximately £2 billion per year, and another report on behalf of the Greater London Authority estimated that as many as 2 in every 3 delivery slots are missed in the capital as a result of congestion. So why does it matter? Urban freight and logistics sits at the heart of numerous urban challenges such as traffic safety, congestion, air pollution, and therefore health. There is a growing need to make our streets become places for people, providing places for play and exercise, as well as acting as facilitators for social interactions and boosting the local economy. This in turn will help to clean the air that we breathe. The pandemic has highlighted this need more than ever, having emphasised the necessity for more space for walking and cycling and the implications that increased active travel and reduced congestion can have on pollution. For example, during lockdown, traffic across London reduced by over 50%, as did hourly concentrations of nitrogen dioxide in some areas. Transitioning to ultra-low and zero-emission logistics is one way that we can tackle issues surrounding air pollution, whilst also improving freight efficiency. This has been acknowledged by both the Mayor of London and UK Government, with targets being set for London's entire transport system to be zero-emission by 2050, and the UK to bring all greenhouse gas emissions to net zero by 2050. Similarly, transitioning to ultra-low and zero-emission logistics contributes to achieving the Healthy Streets approach, a global policy framework that puts people and their health at the centre of decisions about how we design, manage and use public spaces. It aims to tackle challenges such as air pollution and congestion by making streets healthy, safe and welcoming for everyone by prioritising people and their needs. Underpinning the Healthy Streets approach are 10 Healthy Streets indicators that are used to create healthy streets. Transitioning to low-emission logistics helps to achieve several of these Healthy Streets indicators, including those relating to safety, noise, feeling relaxed, and enabling clean air. So what actually are ultra-low and zero-emission vehicles? Well, an ultra-low emission vehicle, or ULEV, is the term used to describe any vehicle that emits less than 75 grams of CO2 per kilometre, whilst a zero-emissions vehicle doesn't emit any emissions at all. There are a number of freight and logistics strategies that incorporate ultra-low and zero-emission vehicles. However, in this workshop, we will be focusing on the following: last-mile deliveries and consolidation centres, cycle freight, and fleet electrification. Therefore, it gives me great pleasure to pass over to my colleague Anusha Rajamani, a project officer at CRP, who will discuss the opportunities and advantages of consolidation centres and last-mile deliveries.
Hello, I'm really happy to be here and talk about last-mile deliveries and consolidation centres. So firstly, freight transport has a large negative impact on the environment. Due to its excessive energy usage, emissions such as carbon dioxide, nitrous oxide, and particulate matter, as well as the social impacts in terms of traffic accidents and noise disturbance. Even if freight transport within urban areas often represent only a small part of the total length of the haul, the last mile problem results in inefficiencies with large costs and environmental impact. Poor air qualities in our cities has recently been making headlines for breaching EU limits. In particular, high levels of nitrogen oxides and particulate matter known to be damaging to health have been linked to diesel engines, which are common amongst light goods vehicles. This problem can be resolved by implementing a sustainable logistics model, such as fuel-efficient vehicles and improved urban transport modes for a better goods delivery system. This figure from TfL shows the percentage of motorized traffic flow accounted by vans on major roads in London. It is a measure of the relative density of vans in traffic, where the highest densities up to and exceeding 50% of traffic are found in central London, with other hotspots around key town centres in inner London. This map is telling of the current and future state of freight operations in London with an evolving e-commerce landscape. The COVID-19 lockdown instigated drastic changes to customer behavior, which has pressured businesses to digitize their operations to reach their customers. With e-commerce businesses changing so rapidly, customer expectations on faster delivery times, parcel tracking, and convenience has now put pressure on online businesses and delivery companies to satisfy the customer's needs. The lockdown saw an increase in the number of deliveries where studies project that this will continue as many customers have permanently changed to online shopping. The pandemic has further highlighted the important health benefits of having cleaner air and less traffic in our town centers. Therefore, it is all the more vital to reorganize our freight transport system into becoming one that is more efficient, cost-effective, and eco-friendly to foster smooth transactions, optimize operational costs, and reduce emissions. So, what is a consolidation center? Well, it can be described as a logistics facility located near to the area it serves, such as a city or shopping center, where goods from outside are received and consolidated. From this point, more environmentally friendly last-mile deliveries can take place, such as cargo bikes, EVs, or even by foot on designated routes to delivery locations, where last-mile delivery is the movement of goods from a consolidation center to the final delivery point. The main objective of last-mile delivery is to deliver items to the customer in the minimum possible time while cutting down company costs and employing eco-friendly measures to reduce emissions. During the last decades, consolidation centers in various operational forms have emerged as a potential answer to ambitions in lowering emissions from last-mile freight transport. However, due to the land changes and the rapid sprawl of urban areas have now become a massive barrier in finding optimal logistic land. Cities like London are a prime example where suitable locations for consolidation centers are now used for other reasons, which in turn inhibits strategic capacity for last-mile solutions. This has an impact when choosing an area for a consolidation center, since dense urban areas have very little space but are in very high demand. Another barrier is behavioral change, possibly the harder challenge to overcome. This, coupled with the initial costs of setting up a center, can be sometimes overwhelming for some businesses. Lastly, studies have shown that when last-mile operations include low or zero-emission vehicles, they are normally more cost-efficient than when using conventional vehicles, where studies have shown that are less successful compared to those that use electric vehicles, which have seen to bring down 60% in vehicle kilometers. A consolidation center reduces the total distance traveled by delivery vehicles in congested urban areas, as well as reducing greenhouse gas emissions associated with these journeys. The total curbside time and space occupied by delivery vehicles can be reduced through consolidation and optimized delivery routes for last-mile operations to further reduce the impact of freight on congestion. In London, where ultra-low emission zone is expansive, implementing a zero-emission fleet is beneficial to the company, as they will not be charged and freight operations will actually be cheaper in the long run, as they will become less reliant on petrol. Other social and environmental advantages include noise reductions through the use of quieter vehicles, as conventional freight vehicles have more powerful and noisy engines than EVs or cargo bikes. Other social benefits are fewer conflicts between delivery vehicles and other road users, as well as greater pedestrian safety. Lastly, shorter delivery times boost morale and productivity of delivery drivers instead of spending a majority of their time stuck in traffic. An example of a consolidation center is the Guy's and St. Thomas's hub, which was built in partnership with Siva Logistics in Dartford. When setting up this consolidation center, the strategic team wanted to ensure that the right infrastructure was in place for vehicles in order to come in and to drop off goods. Some guiding questions they had were, how can they first accommodate the load and traffic coming into the center, and how can they make sure that the warehouses are green? Therefore, EV capabilities at the center is very vital in creating a fully environmentally friendly freight transportation system. The advantages of the hub are, firstly, deliveries were segregated by the needs of the different wards within the hospital, which meant that the end destination was not actually the hospital, but the different requirements and operations within the hospital itself. This allowed staff to spend their valuable time tending to patients and carrying out other tasks instead of spending time clearing out deliveries and storage. The consolidation helped stop vehicles idling in their loading bay, which initially there were too many vehicles coming in for delivery, and consolidation helped reduce the air pollution on site, and this had far-reaching benefits for the patients coming in, the hospital staff, as well as the surrounding community. This space that was initially used for deliveries and storage were repurposed to create more patient-forward spaces, which resulted in higher patient and staff satisfaction. This puts what is normally a hectic space, made it more calm, and had more space allocated for those that needed it most. Although the primary benefits of Consolidation Hub are to reduce delivery time and costs, it also provides significant benefits to the end destination by optimizing space, staff time, and efficiency. Another case study is that of Hospitality Source. This business supplies cleaning products to local businesses and they're based in central London, where all their customers are also based within the same area. These are areas that are highly congested with poor air quality and have very few loading bays. Therefore, this business had frequent deliveries to customers, and not many London businesses have much storage space on site. So with these issues at hand, Hospitality Source wanted to downsize their deliveries and storage requirements. So they came up with a last mile delivery by foot to their customers instead of using delivery vehicles. And they also reformulated their cleaning products. The reformulation of their products became more concentrated in order to reduce waste, where one concentrated bottle replaced 33 of the previous formula. These changes reduced customer costs by 40% and alleviated pressure from unnecessary traffic journeys. Hospitality Source is a key example of how even smaller businesses can create big changes in their delivery system. This shows that massive infrastructural changes are not always needed to reorganize and optimize business operations for zero-emission last-mile deliveries. Here are some testimonials from Guy's and St. Thomas's and Hospitality Source on their experience with optimizing their deliveries and the overall impact of these changes in the environment. Thank you for listening, and I will now pass it on to my colleague Ross.
Hello everyone. Hi, my name is Ross Phillips, and I'm a projects officer at CRP on the Healthy Streets Every Day and Clean Air Villages 3 projects. So today I'll be talking about cycle freight. So firstly, what is cycle freight? Well, cycle freight refers to the transportation of goods using pedal cycles, both electronically assisted and pedal powered. So throughout this, I'll mainly be discussing 2- and 3-wheeled cargo bikes and trikes as well, and referring to them as cargo bikes uniformly. So cycle freight is a quiet and low-cost zero-emission option for transporting goods. In the UK, London has been pioneering cycle freight from the top levels of its governance. As you can see, the Mayor of London is aiming to make London one of the most environmentally sustainable world cities by 2050, particularly through improving its air quality. Low-emission and zero-emission logistics, such as cargo bikes and cycle freight, are a crucial part of this. So what are the advantages of cycle freight? Well, cycle freight is brilliant for certain types of journeys and very easy to navigate in urban areas. It can't necessarily replace all vehicle journeys, but with the right conditions, they can be brilliant. So firstly, there are brilliant air quality and environmental benefits. For example, replacing one 7.5 tonne heavy goods vehicle in central London would save 9.8 tonnes of CO2 emissions, at least 7.4 kilograms of nitrogen oxides, and 60 grams of particulate matter per year. They're also brilliant for speed, flexibility and reliability. This is particularly important with many streetscape improvements that London has seen and many other cities around the world, where many areas have been closed off to cars as part of COVID changes. So cargo bikes can easily navigate streetscape changes, accidents and roadworks that might not appear on a map, such as TfL's COVID street space improvements. In many parts of central London, travelling by bicycle can actually provide a much more direct route and up to 50% reduction in journey time. Parking is also less restrictive for a bike, and they can park nearer to destinations often, which helps to reduce journey time and also provides a more reliable estimate of a journey time as well. They tend to have lower running and maintenance costs by avoiding parking permits, parking fines, no fuel costs and no access charges to ultra-low emission zones or congestion zones such as in London. It's certainly the case when replacing one van, it's very cost effective. A large fleet might be a bit different. But they also have less noise pollution and are very quiet compared with vans, and provide physical health benefits for the rider if you choose to ride it yourself or with someone in your business as well. So what are the barriers? Well, for an SME, space is a big barrier. So a cargo bike might take up a lot of room and there might not be somewhere to store it on the premises. So it's important to keep your options open around sharing of storage facilities and work and collaborate with neighbours in your local area if this might be an issue and you're still interested in a cargo bike. Knowledge and visibility is one of the biggest issues that we encounter. People don't always know what they look like, a cargo bike looks like, what they are and how they operate. Because they're not seen each day on London streets really frequently, this might be hindering their potential. One of the things that we do is we'll often host workshops to demonstrate what a cargo bike is and how it works to improve knowledge of cycle freight for businesses. London's infrastructure can often inhibit use of cargo bikes through the presence of gates and barricades, as well as narrow canal pathways as well. And some riders have found other road users particularly difficult to deal with as well, with the presence of cargo bikes on roads. It's very much an argument for having improved cycling infrastructure. We really need segregated cycle lanes and quiet roads for them to be really effective as well. In terms of regulation, cargo bikes can often be regulated by power and not speed, which can possibly be dangerous. And upfront capital costs are very important, given that they can be expensive to purchase for ownership, particularly now when organisations and businesses are under pressure from COVID-19. So what vehicle options do you have? Well, in terms of the size, they can be as simple as your backpack and a push bike as well, so the same dimensions as this, but usually cargo bikes or trikes will be around 50 centimetres to 120 centimetres wide. Length will vary, very dependent on the cargo box on the front or back, and some newer models can hold up to 2,500 litres or 300 kilograms worth of weight, so they're very flexible for different freight sizes. In terms of cost, they can be well over £10,000, but normal average for this could be 1,500 to 2,500 for a non-electrically assisted pedal-powered bike, and for a trike around 1,500 to 6,500. For anything electrically assisted, you're looking at paying more, so £1,000 to £5,300 for a bike and £5,000 to £10,000 for a trike as well, but you will be able to carry more. So we'd encourage to look at leasing options as well. You can get them for around £50 per day in some places. And also encourage anyone that is looking to purchase a cargo bike to look out for grants available. I know I've mentioned on there the Energy Saving Trust grant scheme, which was open earlier this year, but it's not open now. But it's an important way to look out for ways to save money, as governments around the world are often looking to promote cargo bike usage as well. In terms of the range, it's around 20 to 100 miles, and speed is around 15.5 miles. It's the maximum that a UK electrically assisted cargo bike or bike can go. Any higher and you cannot cycle on ride on cycle paths, and it needs to be registered as a car. But pedal cargo bikes, it's as fast as you can go. In terms of charge time, you're looking at around 1 to 10 hours normally, and there's lots of new niche features available on cargo bikes as well, such as hot and cold boxes, pallets, and large ranges as well. So lots of different options to suit different businesses as well. So in terms of the options for the actual service, there's two different types, point-to-point and first and last mile. Point-to-point services collect items from one party and deliver them to another party at a different location, including business to business, business to customer, customer to customer, or customer to business within a local area. It's a really great option for an SME. But in terms of ownership, you can own outright, or you can choose shared services. Shared services may involve sharing the cargo bike with other businesses. That usually involves point-to-point. It might also involve renting or leasing the cargo bike for a period of time and paying it off over time, operating on specified hours on a fixed contract, or really informal basis by booking when you need it. There may be an option of also including a rider too if you're not comfortable on the roads. In terms of first and last mile delivery, first mile and last mile services carry deliveries from a local distribution centre to a customer or vice versa. It usually requires a national or local distribution centre, and it's usually undertaken by large logistics service providers. So in terms of the key considerations that you want to look at before getting a cargo bike, land use and location are crucial. Cargo bikes and bicycles are really effective in urban areas, as they can often find great cut-throughs and benefit from any good cycling infrastructure and fewer cars. It's certainly the case with London. The ultra-low emission zone expansion for anyone listening from London will take place in October 2021 and cover a lot of London. Cargo bikes won't have to pay the charge to be in central London and will come in very handy once the expansion has been implemented. If you have a large freight, the frequency, formality and size of deliveries is important. So turning all vans into cycle logistics probably won't be particularly cost effective, but it could be really good for a couple of them that go into urban and suburban geographies that suit cycling as well. Similarly, if you're operating with a small number of deliveries, a cargo bike could be a great and cheap option and financially sustainable over the long term. And if there's no regular pattern or frequency, perhaps shared services of a cargo bike could allow greater flexibility. You want to consider distances as well. Cargo bikes are naturally going to be suited to smaller geographies. If your deliveries extend outside of a city, perhaps it might not be, again, the best option. But if your deliveries are mostly local, then it could be great. You want to consider the amount of storage or space to house a bike. You want to ensure that your riders are well trained in cycling with a cargo bike, as this is a big barrier for businesses. Often there'll be options to use a shared courier service and their rider as well. And for local infrastructure and streetscapes, you want to make sure that local conditions allow easy cycling and access for your business compared with a car or van. So to summarise from this, shared courier services will provide a great option for you to trial cargo bikes at a low upfront capital cost, but there may be a point when you're using it and you want to consider ownership. This graphic hopefully indicates the sorts of questions that you want to be asking yourself before purchasing a bike or entering shared service courier agreement as well. So we've now got some case studies to demonstrate the impact of cycling freight on businesses, business improvement districts and communities in London. So Paxton and Whitfield's Cheese are an artisanal cheese provider in London that have been in the city for over 200 years. They wanted to provide a more eco-friendly delivery option, but had limited capacity or resource to deliver on demand to their customers. They switched to cargo bike services and cover approximately 140 miles by bike per week. Their eco-friendly deliveries have been really well received by clients, and they can also deliver one London-wide, so it's not restricted them at all in who their customers are. The cargo bikes can also cater for larger events, and it's had great environmental impacts as well, with model predictions of around 4,000 kilograms of carbon dioxide saved per year, nearly 10 kilograms of nitrogen oxide saved per year, and 300 grams of PM2.5 saved per year as well. Also worked with in Streatham BID, which is a business improvement district, a community of businesses in an area of South London. CRP and in Streatham BID worked together to initiate the idea of introducing a cargo bike, and in Streatham BID were brilliant in implementing this scheme. So initially started with some business engagement with organisations in Streatham by improving the knowledge and awareness of cargo bikes as well. Also introduced some rider training. The bike was actually purchased outright by in Streatham BID as it was seen as more financially sustainable, and it became a shared business community asset. It was housed at a business called Balf's Bikes, who provided great maintenance of the bike and also secure storage. There were free use for in Streatham businesses as well, and they provided easy access to a booking app. But also it was great for the monitoring side of the project. The BID noticed that the cargo bike wasn't being fully utilised through monitoring on the app, and one of the most common barriers was the lack of a rider. So they increased the usage of the bike in the area by introducing a shared rider at a later date. And finally, Parcels Not Pollution was a project by Hammersmith BID, Hammersmith and Fulham Council, e-Cargo Bikes and Transport for London. They worked together to implement a shared cargo bike service. They engaged with the BID's local business community to find out whether a cargo bike delivery service would be useful and how businesses might use it. Again, it was about improving knowledge and awareness of cargo bikes. They introduced a free trial for businesses to use, and funding from TfL was secured as well. But as well as improving air quality, it really shows the flexibility that can come from implementing a cargo bike service, particularly shared within a community. So COVID-19 unfortunately hit during the trial, but it remodeled the approach. And the cargo bike was actually used to assist shielding members of communities with deliveries such as food parcels, provide food to the food bank, and also provide pharmacy support for anyone that was shielding in the area. It was also expanded into Shepherd's Bush due to the success of working with these organisations as part of the village's involvement with Clean Air Villages too. And it definitely shows the flexibility of cargo bikes. So here we have some testimonials of the organisations I've just mentioned that we worked with as well, that really saw the value in cycle freight. But yeah, thank you for listening, and I hope this has been helpful. I'll now pass over to my colleague Laura, who will go through all things fleet electrification.
Hi everyone, thanks Ross for all of that great description about cargo bikes. So I am Laura, I am Senior Project Officer at Cross River Partnership, and I work on Clean Air Villages project mostly, which focuses on deliveries and freight and other projects related to freight. So I'm going to go through fleet electrification, which is obviously quite big in freight at the moment, and especially in denser city areas. So there has been a case now for a while for electric freight vehicles to be part of plans for low emissions freight strategies. Traditionally, in the past, governments have definitely focused more on passenger cars and buses, as they still do make up a large proportion of transport in cities. In London, we have noticed that there's about 16% of the traffic is commercial vehicles, so those are going to be freight vehicles delivering into businesses across the capital. And in the morning peak is probably the worst time for pollution, where we have about 28% is just for the commercial. So freight movements are essential to most cities. They will be providing a service for businesses across the city to be working well, and for everyone to be able to go to the shops and get the products they need. So they are a vital service, and we just need to find ways to make them more sustainable. There are advantages, as there are no tailpipe emissions, and obviously it will reduce CO2. The one big thing about freight vehicles that is a concern for pollution is the amount of congestion that there are in the denser cities. And as my colleagues have said before, there is a lot of benefits to changing over for air pollution, as well as social impacts. And throughout the last few years and the coming few years, there is a huge emphasis on clean air zones, on low emission traffic neighbourhoods across cities and towns across the UK and the world. And the idea is to help benefit public health for these areas and just make it a better place to live and work, really. So there is a case for electrifying fleets. Now, most of the times we work with businesses, we do come up with the barriers first to switching to EV. I'd like to say that it isn't for everyone. It is a very individual journey, an individual business journey to look at your own fleet and decide whether it's something you can do financially or if it's viable. And some of the barriers that we tend to get through talking to businesses are the following on the slide. So I'll go through them in a little bit more detail. So there is an uncertainty of efficiency in the vehicles because a lot of freight vehicles are quite new to the market. There isn't enough evidence on how well they operate. There's not enough peers that have tried and trained on these vehicles as well. Freight electric vehicles are very different. You aren't going to go to a petrol station. You will have to have a charging infrastructure of some sort. You do change your behaviour, and driver education behaviour is a key barrier to switching to EV. You need your drivers to be keen to switch and change their behaviour and learn a new way to drive a vehicle. So this can be quite a big barrier when even wanting to put EVs in your fleet. There is also been a lack of models on the market, and the lead times to get EVs through to businesses has taken quite a lot of time, as there isn't that many at the moment from the manufacturers, which has meant that the ones that are out tend not to have the mileage or the payloads to their equivalent diesel and petrol vehicles. This also means by having less vehicles on the market, there tends to be a bigger cost for the vehicle up front and also the infrastructure. So these are quite common barriers that most businesses come across when they are looking to electrify their fleets. However, there are ways to overcome those challenges. And in our project, we do spend a lot of time engaging with businesses on how best to switch your fleet over. And we do normally start with, how are you currently looking at your fleet? What is the mileage that you are really doing? What is your realistic payload? What is the financial obligations you have for your fleet, whether you have bought them outright or you've leased your fleet? You need to collect that data to make sure that you are going to have a good switchover. This is really, really important. And the way that we do that in our projects is we are using telematics systems to understand what businesses are doing at the moment and how they could adapt. As I said, the barrier of cost is a huge thing for businesses. This is whether you're a small business or a large business. It is worth looking at if there are any external grants and funding. Many governments across the world have used grants to push businesses over to electrifying their fleets, and it's worth checking this out. There is also the driver behaviour as well as commercial behaviour. Many fleets tend to either buy outright their vehicles and they will need them for a certain amount of time. If you're changing to EV, the way that the technology is going, it is better to lease in certain options so that you get the newest technology. They are changing at a rapid speed, electric vehicles. So if you want to keep getting the best model for yourselves, it is better to have not a financial obligation for 10 years buying a vehicle. Charging infrastructure is another thing that is huge when it comes to changing over to your fleet. You will need to know where your vehicle is when it is standing, when it's parked for over a certain amount of hours. This will enable you to work out whether you can physically put infrastructure in yourself or whether you can use public available charging. And then finally, there are a lot of policies coming into place and regulation, as my colleagues have mentioned before. There are clean air zones, there are the ULEZ, and this will happen in most cities. So it's worth checking, if you were to transition, what you would not be paying in congestion fee and things like that, which can help with the financial obligations. We have another infographic to kind of go through a little bit more about what the other questions you will need to ask yourself. And this is very much towards the products and services that you're delivering. the type of vehicle that you will need will be dependent on what products you are delivering. So you will need to think about the refrigeration aspect if it is food, how many days that you necessarily need the vehicle for. Do you have pallets? This will all affect the payload and the mileage that you would need from your electric equivalent. It's looking at also how you're delivering that. Do you have your own depot? And also the ongoing costs tend to be cheaper than the diesel equivalent for maintenance. And so, as I said, there weren't many models for electric vans and freight vehicles about 2 years ago. However, this has really changed since the demand across the world has risen in freight electric vehicles. And as you can see here from Lease Plan, they have showed there are new models coming into the market, and this goes from the small LCVs to medium to large, which before there weren't as many. And you can see the payloads have increased as well as the mileage. These vehicles are very useful for inner city movements. And this is another thing to think about, is whether you have a vehicle that is going into the city and also on motorways. That will really make a difference to the mileage that you will need across your fleet. Funding opportunities, as I said, there can be government funding opportunities both for charging infrastructure and for vehicle purchase. There are also local ones, and so for London there was some TfL funding, and they are constantly reviewing the scrappage schemes that are in place. And it's worth looking at the resources that there are. The government does have the Office of Low Emission Vehicles, and they do give out a lot of information. And Low City is an organisation for freight owners across London to talk about what is coming out in the market and how they can be helped with regulation. So charging infrastructure, this tends to be a conversation that doesn't happen straight away, but actually is needed straight away. You will need to know the charging infrastructure to then realise how your fleet will be electrified. And as you can see on the left, there are a lot of charging points across London already and across the UK. It is worth checking the type of charger that you need for your vehicle, and this will all depend on the questions that were asked above about the amount of mileage that you would necessarily need for a day. Then you can plan out when you would need to charge your vehicle at the most convenient times for you as a business. On the right, we have created a case study on implementing local charging infrastructure. And this looks at the private sector and how they could put charging points in. What are the questions you need to ask yourself? This includes securing funding, the right type of infrastructure. So this could be from a small charging point to a variety of charging points at different speeds, if this was needed. Also, who should be involved? Are the right stakeholders involved at the start? This will include landowners who will need to give permission, also the grid network as well, to check that this is useful for your depot or environment. And one of the biggest things to think about in the next few years is the legislations that are coming in. The Central London Ultra Low Emission Zone at the moment, as you can see on the left, is in the orange, and this will be extended in October 2021 next year into where the yellow zone is. So this is a big change, and this will affect all vehicles, including cars, motorbikes, HGVs, LGVs that are coming in to London. This is to make sure that the vehicles are as clean as possible. And then there is also another zone coming in called the low emission zone, which is focused on the larger freight vehicles. This daily rate will be a lot more expensive if you do not have the right vehicle, and that is a daily charge of £100. Lots more details are on TfL's website for the exact charges. And then on the right, I have got a infographic from London councils who have showed how many boroughs across just London are looking at climate change and targeting carbon neutrality or net zero. This is quite important because it will mean not only the ultra low emission zone, but things like the clean air zones, low emission neighbourhoods will be a priority for these areas. So, you know, that is quite a lot of boroughs across London that are all seeing this as quite important to them. And so now for the case studies to show that actually this has worked, this has really helped some certain businesses. So we have Planet Minimal here, who are a small cleaning company. They started their business with an electric vehicle purely because he had worked in the electric vehicle industry before, Hamish, and he felt that this was the way to go forward and wanted to make sure that he was having a positive impact on the community he was serving. Now, he did take a second-hand electric vehicle and it has worked really, really well for him. There is a case study on our website that goes through a lot more of the information, but it's definitely worth having a look at on how did that help him, how did he purchase his vehicle, and it shows the cheaper ongoing cost that he had. Then it has enabled him with this green brand and electrifying his fleet to be on the Clean Air Villages directory, which actually promotes all businesses that have decided to electrify their fleets. And then we have the Brixton BID-shared EV scheme. So this is a very different type of scheme. This is a scheme that we set up through the Clean Air Villages project, and it's about a multiple amount of businesses using one vehicle with the Zip car and it being an EV. So this enabled 10 businesses that were from different sectors: food sector, garden sector, florists, charities, all to use one vehicle and use an EV rather than using their vehicle that they had at that point. This enabled them to try out a vehicle like an EV that they wouldn't have been able to purchase outright. And it has really made a difference to them as a business. They feel that it's the way forward, and also it's helped them with their brand as well. And lastly, the smart electric urban logistics. When I was talking about how important it is, if you are either a small business or a large business, to look at charging infrastructure. So we had this project with UPS and we worked with them on how, by increasing their fleet and electrifying it in central London, what would they need for the smart grid technology to implement the amount of chargers they would need. Now, this did mean that they could bring in 20 more vehicles after really looking into the technology behind smart charging. So if you are a larger operator and you have more than 20 vehicles that will be needing to be charged, it is worth looking into how innovative the smart charging system you have already is, or anything that you could do above that. This enables you to electrify your fleet a lot quicker and make sure that you are saving money at the same time, and will mean that you will not have to update your technology every year if you're going to continuously buy more electric vehicles. And then that is it, but it is worth looking at mixed fleet, like we've said in before, and electrifying as much as you possibly can. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you for that great presentation, Laura. And of course, a big thank you to the rest of today's speakers. So I just wanted to finish this workshop with a quick summary and look to the future. So as stated previously, air quality is the largest environmental health risk in the UK, and transitioning to zero emission logistics forms a key part of the solution to this problem. In fact, the total emissions from freight need to almost fully decarbonise by 2050 in order to meet the climate ambitions set out in the Paris Agreement. So more is needing to be done if we are to meet this target. However, transitioning to zero emission logistics also has social and economic benefits. For example, helping to improve road safety and congestion, whilst also improving efficiency and therefore productivity as a result of less lost time. As the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, said, supporting businesses to switch to electric vans and cargo bikes will make freight more efficient whilst also reducing road danger and cleaning up London's toxic air. However, despite the advantages discussed today, getting to zero emissions in logistics still remains a daunting prospect. Improvements in technology, the development of zero-emission fuels, and improvements in the variety of low-emission vehicles available on the market will all be critical as part of the overall solution. However, a key aspect also includes helping people to understand the options available and enabling a shift in mindset. As Anusha, Ross and Laura have all pointed out, there are many cases where the use of consolidation centres or switching to cycle freight or electric vehicles can be viable and even economically beneficial options. However, more consideration needs to be given to measures that help encourage uptake if we are to meet the goal of being net zero by 2050. For example, moving towards a larger network of consolidation centres that incorporate micro-consolidation could help to encourage more sustainable last-mile deliveries, whilst also providing an opportunity to use less carbon-intensive transport modes such as rail and river. Additionally, creating more cycle-friendly environments and providing space for storage and cycle hubs could help to increase the uptake of cycle freight, as could the promotion of cycle freight to businesses. Similarly, improving electric vehicle infrastructure, such as providing additional charging depots and high power or on-the-go charging to enable a bigger shift to electric vehicles and also support the use of electric fleets. However, one of the most important steps in helping transition to zero-emission logistics is information sharing and guidance. By providing real-life experiences of those who have made the switch to low-emission logistics, such as cycle freight or fleet electrification, we can help to encourage other businesses to do the same. I therefore hope that this workshop has helped to provide useful information on the considerations and opportunities available to businesses, as well as some good examples of low-emission freight in practice. Finally, if you would like to learn more about zero-emission logistics, please have a look at the resources that we have mentioned throughout the workshop. We have provided links to these resources, including CRP's ultra-low emission supplier directory that lists businesses that are using low-emission freight solutions, such as fully electric, ultra-low emission vehicles, cargo bikes, and even deliveries by foot, on the next slide. There we go. So finally, if you have any questions about any of the content discussed in this workshop, please do contact us using the contact details on screen. Additionally, for more information about the Cross River Partnership, you can find us on LinkedIn, YouTube and Twitter, and you can also sign up to CRP's fortnightly newsletter to receive updates on all things CRP. So thank you very much for attending this workshop and enjoy the rest of your day.